Okay, this is another response to Emblem of Being. Hello there, John. This is a response to your video, in response to my video called something like "The Mind is Newtonian," and your response was called something like "The Mind is Palatial, not Spatial." I read it as palatial, but I think it's palatial, isn't it? To do with place rather than space. I think you're bang on there again, which I think I mentioned in the comments. So I want to see if I can build in your thinking to move my own forward a wee bit in this. Because what I was saying in the original one, it was part of a discussion, I think, kind of involving Pyrrho, kind of about, oh, I don't remember what it was about now, but it was something to do with common sense and how easy it is to intuit certain things, and how sometimes you have to operate outside of common sense. And I think it was actually tangential to a discussion about free will. What I was saying there was free will is a kind of an artifact thrown up when you apply common sense to something that isn't common sense, doesn't respond well to common sense. Possibly, it's just an idea. Anyway, to get back on topic, yeah, the mind. Yeah, I said, is the mind Newtonian? In there, I was sort of not exactly quoting, but in my head, I was running through an article or an essay I saw once about, is the brain Newtonian? Or does the brain model Newton's laws, I think it was called. Basically, which was suggesting that we do have an innate sense of physics. We're able to intuit certain physical activities, like the path of a ball that's thrown, or sort of conservation rules. These things seem to be not present at birth, but are picked up far too quickly than to be established through learning processes. So there's something relatively innate, apparently, I don't know how well proven this is, something relatively innate about our ability to intuit something that's approximately Newton's laws of motion. Now that shouldn't be too surprising, given that Newton's laws of motion basically apply to middle-sized objects moving at middle speed, like ourselves. We've spent a long time, in evolutionary terms, or our genome at least, has spent a long time moving through environments at middle speed and with middle-sized objects. So it shouldn't be too surprising if those regularities have kind of imprinted themselves on us in terms of our behaviours and the affordances we recognise about the world and so on. So in that sense, it's quite likely that the brain, in some way, will model Newton's laws, and to the extent that the mind is a product of the brain, or a process of the brain, I suppose, it would seem logical, to me at least, that to that extent the mind has something Newtonian about it. I mean, I've talked about this before. Again, I'm not saying I'm right, it's just an idea I quite like, which is, while the brain clearly operates on very, very sophisticated and complex biochemical, physical processes, possibly even involving quantum processes. I mean, there's no big evidence of that, but it's certainly possible that microtubules could contain quantum processes. Whilst that's true of the brain, the mind, the bit of the, as I say, that process in the brain, in that sound, which allows us to model things, it does seem to predominantly use the machinery of pumps and wheels and windlasses and levers and the kind of middle-sized 19th century technology of steam engines and pumps and so on. Basically Newtonian engines. I think it's probably better to say that the mind uses Newtonian kind of engines rather than anything else. Anyway, but in relation to space, because this is interesting, I think, really interested, because obviously Newton and kind of Descartes modelled a particular understanding of space. But I think what they were doing there, I think it's an argument to be made, that what they were doing there is really just kind of formalising an abstraction process that we're already capable of, and that the mind itself is capable of, and they put it into words and equations and clear images. Yes, we've all got this, as you rightly point out. This is a great observation, I have to say. We do interact with places. I'm in a place right now. I'm in a place in this car in front of this wheel, and I'm in a place going forward on this motorway. But those relationships in front of this wheel and going forward on this motorway are oriented around myself, and they're part of my placing. And the fact that it's my car and this motorway journey has a purpose, again, it's part of my placing. And everything we do is placed like that, and all our orientations are placed like that, and so on. But clearly, in addition to that, we also have a kind of dead reckoning, don't we? You know what I mean? Or different kinds of orientation systems. You know, in addition to my being in front of the steering wheel, in front of this lorry, heading south, actually heading down the M6, I could also say I am heading south, and I unproblematically understand that. I can probably say I am heading from one town to another, and I can name those towns, and I can unproblematically give a readout about the distance between myself and the wheel, and these are not these are aspects of place which are not just particular to me, they're particular of anybody who's in this place. And some of them are particular to all of us who are on this motorway at this moment. We're all heading south. You know, south is the same for all of us right now. You know, even if there wasn't this thing called south out there in the world, the fact that we're all heading in the same direction gives a commonality, the universality, the interpersonal, intersubjective set of coordinates that I think we can start to draw upon. I mean, they are a kind of abstraction. They're places stripped of personal associations and stripped of intentionality and stripped of the time of their occupation. You know, just take all these places and strip all these things away, and you are left with coordinates, probably Cartesian coordinates. You know, everyone's got an up, everyone's got a left and right, everyone's got a front and back. And if everyone's on the planet, you know, everyone's got a south and north and an east and west and an up and a down. And it's kind of the same for everyone, and it's almost as if by the abstractions of these common features from all these places that we occupy, we kind of and the kind of Deixis processes that we use, that we kind of intuitively formulate an understanding of something we might call space, which does bear uncanny resemblance to Newtonian space. A Newtonian space which is stripped of the particularity of personal investment, and stripped of the particularities of time and occupation, and replaced by, you know, sets of coordinate points, infinite coordinate points, in which every place is equal to every other place. Yeah, but as I say, Newton formulated that. But again, as I say, the important thing in terms of, for me at least, in terms of what I'm thinking about here, is that the mind seems to be modelling it. It isn't that Newton came up with that idea of space and then we all like, oh yeah, that's right. It's more like he formulated what was already present as an abstraction that we're all involved in, otherwise we wouldn't be able to draw maps or give directions or imagine another person's viewpoint. Imagine abstraction. It's taken those abstractions and that in all of us transform place into space and worked it out in terms of a physics. So to that extent, I think the mind is, yes, the mind does the place thing, and I think Aristotle is a good place to go for this as well, and Ptolemy. But yeah, the mind does the place thing for sure. But I think it's also capable of doing the space thing just by routine processes, which, as I say, Newton formalised. I think it stops there. I don't see any evidence that the mind can do the 11-dimensional hyperspace thing. I don't think it can do that. I don't think it can do infinity. I think there's lots of things it can't do. But I think the mind does model Newton's laws, and Newton's laws model interpersonal relationships and interpersonal commonalities of space, of place, of object, of relations. Anyway, thanks very much.